Sri Lanka, the role of externalities, and geopolitical chessboard. The duration of the session, as the previous, will include the Q&A session, which will commence after the presentation of Dr. Hasith. He will be joining us virtually. I would request the dignified participants to hold on to their question till the chair indicates the inception of the Q&A session. For the Q&A, we may also include the questions that are presented in the comment box of our YouTube channel. And also I would request our friends from media to put their instruments to the sides so that the view it is not been blocked, especially for our the students. Sir, sir. Now, I would request Colonel R. Hariharan, VSM retired, to please come on the stage and begin the proceedings. Thank you.
Friends, after having a good lunch, kindly don't doze off because you are having another feast of knowledge of areas which were only covered peripherally. We have the first session, Sri Lanka and Geopolitical Competition by Commodore Venugopal. Followed by Group Captain R. Srinivasan on Sri Lanka crisis and international theories. I suppose this for the students, yes, particularly because there were very much debate international theories, I suppose, perspectives and lessons. And lastly, on the topic of role of externalities and geopolitical chessboard, Dr. Hasith Kandaudahewa. I'm sorry mispronouncing the Senegalese name. He is from the Department of International Relations, University of Colombo. He will be joining virtually. Over to Commodore Venugopal.
Thank you, sir. It's okay. Move. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am in a lighter vein. I am facing three challenges now. What is the first one being to speak on Sri Lanka in Chennai with the Kaveri Delta effect in the background. The emotional connect between Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. The second major challenge being that I am speaking about the topic in front of most distinguished experts on the topic. Now you ask me what is the third one. Well, my would-be son-in-law or Mafla is going to be Sri Lanka. You can choose a headset. Right. Yeah. You can take. That was on a lighter vein. Missed out. The first challenge is speaking on speaking on Sri Lanka in Chennai with the Kaveri Delta effect in the background. That is the emotional connect between Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. I am sure the youngsters could research on the topic Kaveri Delta effect. The next challenge being I am speaking in front of an august gathering full of experts on the subject. Yeah, okay. And the third one I said that's on a personal note that my would-be Mapilla or son-in-law is a Sri Lankan. Okay, I'll start off with the topic rather than wasting my time on giving these introductions. Yeah, a traditional way of doing a presentation, I'll follow that, which I've learned 30 years back or 40 years back. I'll maintain the same, can't change being a Navy man, the sequence. Now, I'll go on to this term geopolitics. Geopolitics is basically the relation of geography with international relations. Mic, please. Either you have this, the best. I will look at geopolitics from the point of view of geography, in relation with the politics and international relations. Now, as a Navy man, I will always give utmost importance to sea. The sea is what connects the nations, and the sea is the medium for geopolitics in a way. It has got both a commercial use in peace and a wartime role. Now, the sea medium is always dynamic in nature. Similarly, geopolitics is also a dynamic subject which keeps waving with time and tide. So today's relevance of a particular relation may not be relevant tomorrow or the next year. Geography. Now, if you see the choke points in Indian Ocean region of ours, you've got the Strait of Hormuz between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. You have the Bab el-Mandab Straits. You have the Bab el-Mandab Straits between Djibouti and Yemen. You have the Mozambique Channel, the Strait of Malacca that you all are aware of, the Sunda Strait, and the Lombok Strait. These lines are the sea lanes of communication. You'll find it connects basically the continent of Europe with Asia. If you watch closely, the tiny drop here, eardrop here, is Sri Lanka. All the sea lanes of communication is passing almost 6 to 10 nautical miles from Sri Lanka. This is the reason why Sri Lanka is of strategic importance in today's world. It has always been, but the fact remains that more so from the point of view of today's geopolitical context. It is the center of Indian Ocean. It's between Europe and Asia, as I mentioned. If you see, Sri Lanka or Colombo port is of much more commercial importance than any port in the Indian coastline, because the sea routes pass close to Colombo or close to Sri Lanka. That gives this country a lot of strategic importance. Almost 60,000 ships, 2/3 of the world's oil, 50% of container traffic pass through this particular ocean route. The energy security for Southeast Asia and the Far East depends a lot on these sea lanes of communication. Okay, yeah, fine. Sorry for all these interruptions. We'll move on. As I mentioned, importance of Sri Lanka from the geostrategic location point of view. Now, I think the first 2 points I've already covered. Now, relevance of littoral states in Indian Ocean has become more and more prominent in today's context. Sri Lanka basically has a history of being ruled by the Portuguese, Dutch, and the British colonial under their rule, and they ensured that the port of Colombo is vital for maintaining their maritime trade. The fierce competition for control of Indian Ocean and the sea lane of communication has been historically been there, although it has not been in the limelight till the last 20 years or so, with the Chinese coming in. Now, in a way, Sri Lanka is in the crossroads of geopolitical competition, basically between China, US, Japan, Australia, and India. I will not mention about Pakistan. I don't seem to them to be relevant in this case at all. Probably I'll include Indonesia in a way. The crossroads effect has made an impact on its domestic and foreign policy, which is very, very obvious. The main factor is the rise of China in today's world. This has happened since early 2000s, but the fact is that most of the other nations slept during the time when Chinese were up and about. So we seem to be having a lot of criticism about China is doing this, China is doing that. Nobody asked you not to do. You were sleeping. That's it. Now coming to Indo-Sri Lanka relations, as I mentioned, dates back to ancient times, the Kaveri Delta effect, which I talked about, India's role in Indo-Pacific region. With this Indo-Pacific region becoming a mainstay in today's geopolitics, India has assumed a significant role in this whole concept. The Indo-Pacific term itself is basically an American thought process, which we all keep repeating. Although Sri Lanka has followed a very neutral foreign policy all these years, they've been following a neutral foreign policy all these years, the fact remains, with increased Chinese influence, can Sri Lanka change in the future? However hard we try to analyze this question, the answer is not readily available. But the fact remains that geoeconomics, that is, the money, is a key to geopolitics in today's world. Now, already this point has been covered. There's been a trilateral maritime security cooperation agreement between India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives, just signed in March 2021. This is basically for improving surveillance, anti-piracy ops, and reducing maritime pollution. These are all peacetime kind of roles. Colombo Security Conclave, signed on 7 July this year between India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, and Bangladesh and Seychelles as observers. It covers the maritime safety and security, terrorism, transnational crimes, cyber security, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, HADR. Oh, well, China. The main focus is on the Belt and Road Initiative, and China has realized the emerging importance of Sri Lanka in the future. And that's the reason why they have, gradually built their footprint in Sri Lanka. This is only going to increase with time, possibly after the current situation or current impasse actually gets stable. As per the United States relations with Sri Lanka, it's been a low-key military relationship, I would say. But with a renewed focus on Indo-Pacific region, there has been an added US effort to engage much more deeply with the Sri Lanka. As you know, this status of forces agreement, this is something which I need to explain for a half a minute for the young audience. This gives a legitimacy for a foreign military to be present in a foreign land. Like for the US to position their troops or their ships or their air base in Sri Lanka, they need a legal sanctity which gives a certain amount of immunity for the US citizens and US military personnel to move in and out of Sri Lanka. And also legitimacy against any local crimes and all that. Now, there's been a lot of effort to get this agreement renewed. Mike Pompeo had gone there in 2019 to engage with Sri Lankan government, but the political opposition in Sri Lanka is not in favor of renewing this agreement. After the Civil War, in December 2009, the US Foreign Relations Committee report had mentioned or focused on recharting relations with Sri Lanka post-Civil War. Why? The tagline is, US cannot afford to lose Sri Lanka to China. Japan and Australia. Japan is one of the major donors and development partner. And General has covered that topic very lucidly. I don't need to go into that. Australia has got a robust bilateral relationship with over 6 decades now. A defense white paper of Australia, which is valid till 2035, says that they need to engage with Sri Lanka for protection of maritime resources, combat maritime criminal network, and defense cooperation, including transfer of military equipment. What is the dilemma for Sri Lanka? You have a neutral foreign policy, but at the same time, you got assistance from China in a big way. You have the 4 big countries, trying to engage with you. The Chinese are trying to transform the economic interest to military interests. So will this policy change with the change in regime in Sri Lanka? We need to watch for that. Indo-Pacific factor. This is another thing which is gaining a lot of prominence today. This is basically referring to the Indo-Pacific region, its strategic posture, the geographic expansion of Asia-Pacific to Indo-Pacific. What does it mean actually? It is one and the same. It is just that the Indian Ocean has been added to the Asia-Pacific term, and now it has become Indo-Pacific. Nothing more, nothing less. Only thing is that the Indo-Pacific region, Indo-Pacific region normally extends from here all the way to the Pacific. But at the same time, they include Pakistan also in the same Indo-Pacific concept. Although Pakistan forms part of Central Command, US Central Command. So there is so much of variation in the concept of Indo-Pacific. Exactly the geographic location, how is it, where is it? There is no answer to that. It's around west coast of India to the Pacific. Now, the Indo-Pacific, which is spoken about by all these countries, talks about a rule-based international order. Well, what is rule-based international order? You have an answer to it? Well, I don't have. Rule-based international order is a concept which every country conveniently interpret that to their advantage. The Americans talk in a way, if we talk in a way, Japan will talk in another way. So that's the relevance of Indo-Pacific or rule-based international order. Now what does China do? China's BRI is basically with the Asian characteristics. Now what are the challenges that China faces? I think we covered most of it. It is, same projection of sea power in major waterways and choke points in Indian Ocean. China, I'm sure, has taken a page out of Admiral Mahan's sea power theory. Now they need to maintain a balance of power between their economic interests and between their foreign policy objectives, between China, India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. That is one of the major challenges. Now, this figure should have been the other way around. Why it is like this? It's because for 20 years, all the major nations ignored China's rise. So China grew into an economic superpower and now is extending all along to project its power. After the Second World War, the United States extended their power by having the new military bases all around the globe. Similarly, China is following suit. So is there anything wrong in it? No, I'm not a China, no love labor laws for China, but this is what geopolitics is all about. So the main characters who are at fault are these four countries who did not check China's rise during that time. Now the challenges for Sri Lanka, basically they have to get out of this domestic issues and also stabilize their economy. They have to have a institutional foreign policy and not a foreign policy based on personalities like the Gotabaya regime. It's very important for them to balance and have a national security policy and a foreign policy and a domestic policy in their best national interests. And for that, they need to engage with all friendly countries, whoever can provide them the stability. So any government in Sri Lanka should be able to manage or to maintain a balance between the economic and geopolitical challenges. And they need to balance the national interest, security concerns. Here again, a quick fix solution may not be productive, or I would say counterproductive. So they need to have engagement, both economical and political, with the countries mentioned in the slide, and China as well. India cannot do this all by themselves. And neither we have the kind of economic clout, nor the political will to stabilize Sri Lanka in its present form. That means Sri Lanka has to deal with other friendly nations as well to balance and overcome the current situation. That's all I have. I'll be able to take on any questions in the Q&A session. Thank you so much. Providing aid, but not during the current situation, but earlier. They had a kind of a footprint there.
I call upon Dr. Srinivasan Should I call you a group captain or a doctor?
Just call me Srinivasan. Just call me Srinivasan.
A doctor can't be a group captain, I presume. He will touch upon this political economic theory for the benefit particularly of the students. They can debate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, there is such an eminent scholarship based on direct exposure to Sri Lanka that from the morning onwards we've been hearing about various dimensions that have affected, taken place, or going to affect in that small little island country, and therefore probably to the larger region called South Asia, or maybe still larger, the world. I, for one, thought that I will step aside from looking into Sri Lankan crisis from the point of view of analyzing as to why it has happened, what are the causes, and how Sri Lanka can retrieve itself. I have consciously stepped aside from this perspective or analysis. What I have taken instead is perspectives from international relations theory, perspectives from political economic theory, and perspectives from what we call as behavioral economics. I have taken certain precepts from these theories through which I have tried to place the events which have taken place in Sri Lanka. The idea is to see whether international relations theory can actually help us to understand a nation, because as we commonly believe, international relations is all about understanding the relationship between nations. So I again stepped aside and I said, let me have a look at one single nation, but I will use international relations theory. So that is what I'm going to present in front of you. Sri Lanka's descent into chaos and complete failure of its government and institutions is largely being discussed as a result of excessive reliance on Chinese assistance by its political leadership. While political and economic analysts deliberate on the phenomenon with a view to understand greater implications of China's BRI dream, especially in South Asia, I have attempted to evaluate, as I said, the crisis relying upon precepts from various theories. But then to do so, I'll change. To do so, I have taken certain presumptions. You know, in research we call it as hypothesis. Okay, I have taken certain presumptions. Those presumptions are the countries in the decolonized world have challenges that in part originate from the colonial characteristics of their politics. Many subscribe to or at least give credence to dynastic politics, irrespective of whether such dynasties actually have evolved with deeper appreciation of international political and economic regimes. The second presumption is, in the post-Cold War era, most of these nations liberalized their economies with a view to latch on to the bandwagon of globalization. They believed that development and its potential economic rewards will subsume internal issues like conflicts, suppression of rights, and ethnic bias. The third presumption is, in order to address the investment gap, these countries looked upon international lending agencies. However, commensurate attention was not paid to developing domestic capacity to receive and benefit from the external assistance, as well as to attain what we call as distributive justice. The fourth presumption is, considering the issues of ethnic strife, poor infrastructure, and endemic corruption noticed across South Asia, I am not saying Sri Lanka alone. Okay, considering the issues of ethnic rife, poor infrastructure, and endemic corruption noticed across South Asia, excessive reliance on external debt eventually undermines sustainable economic growth. precipitating political and economic chaos that we are presently seeing in Sri Lanka. By using this hypothesis, now I have chosen to make 6 slides, of course with some supplementary information. The first concept that I take is from international relations theory, which you are all aware, realism. Okay? Realism places a high regard for the value of national security and state survival. Before its independence and thereafter, Sri Lankan political leadership had propagated a belief that ethnic minorities are the cause for marginalization of the majority Sinhalese and economic deprivation of majority Sinhalese. This misguided realism, therefore, was perceived as national security and national survival by the majority political parties in Sri Lanka. I have given you certain instances to reinforce why I think realism applies here. We all know that in 1944, J.R. Jayawardene put forward a resolution. I'm talking about 1944, before Sri Lanka became independent. Okay, 1944, Jayawardene put across a resolution to the State Council to make Sinhalese and Tamil official languages of Sri Lanka. There were to be 2 official languages. But however, his own party, the United National Party, campaigned for Sinhala only policy in 1956, the first general elections. Bandaranaike, I'm talking about SWRD Bandaranaike, used Sinhalese nationalism to come to power, and in 1956, on a promise of making Sinhalese the official language of the country, introduced Official Language Act, which made Sinhala as the only official language. So they went back on the promises. Fine, I'm not explaining. Okay, I'm just looking at only realism as theory and how it contributes. Tamil opposition to the Sinhala only act by federal party, that is Tamils, okay, resulted in race riots in 1956. Okay, protest against the act was met by state violence. Bandaranaike and the leader of the Freedom Party, Chelvanayakam, inked Bandaranaike Chelvanayakam Pact, which included provisions to make Tamil as an official language for administration in the northern areas and also give them certain amount of autonomy. However, with the elections and the win that the UNP had in the election, all these promises were forsaken. So what happened? The perception of the majority Sinhalese political parties that minorities are to be relegated to the background and they are to be suppressed, and that is the only way to safeguard national interest. It was their perception. That is why I have used the word misguided realism. Right. Okay. The widow of Bandaranaike, that is Sirimavo Bandaranaike, who took over the leadership of SLFP in 1960, completely abandoned the Tamil Language Act. In 1972, a left-wing coalition left by Mrs. Bandaranaike, that is SLFP, okay, came to power and promulgated a new constitution for Sri Lanka. This constitution is the first republican constitution in Sri Lanka, and it made Tamil language as subordinate, the Tamil Language Act which we mentioned earlier, it made that act into a subordinate legislation. After making it subordinate legislation, Mrs. Bandaranaike did not stop. What did she do? She made Buddhism as the foremost religion of the state of Sri Lanka. For your information, okay, the Rajapaksa family and all the families which you are talking about, they are not Buddhists. Please check. You will find that they are Christians. Fine. Right. Okay. That is politics. Okay. Contrary to the belief, liberal belief. Now I am talking about liberal internationalism. Right? Liberal internationalism which has been rendered a myth. How? Contrary to the liberal belief that democracies are less likely to make war. Because liberal internationalism believes that democratic ethos, the voters' power, will prevent the governments from getting into violence which will destroy the country. This is the interpretation of liberal internationalism. But however, our distinguished speakers before have already outlined 30 years of ethnic conflict. 30 years of ethnic conflict rendered this liberal internationalism and the belief that democracies are less prone to war a myth. So saying, I will just move on to the next slide, just to show you how from 1970 onwards, 1972 and 1976 are important years to understand Sri Lanka, but I am not discussing Sri Lanka, I am discussing theory. Okay? So from 1970 onwards, you will find that the military expenditure of the state government, government of Sri Lanka has consistently risen so much. A country which doesn't have existential threats, a country which has no known outside enemies. India has Pakistan, China, God knows who else. Okay? Sri Lanka doesn't have. They created a myth inside, ethnic violence, and the defense expenditure rose to a proportion which the national economy cannot sustain. And facts are there. Our General Sir also spoke about it. Right. Okay. Now what happened? Because of this increasing this thing, the cost of the conflict, 30 years of conflict, what did it do to Sri Lanka? We must understand that it is estimated that USD, all figures are in USDs, take a 200 billion worth of damage to physical and social infrastructure happened in Sri Lanka. How a country which does not have that kind of a GDP can ever restructure itself with that kind of a damage? Fine, fair enough. Okay, estimated 350,000 people have been killed, or they have become refugees in their own countries or abroad. Okay, in terms of foreign direct investment, FDI is a critical component for economic growth of any country, and anyone knows it. Everyone knows it. The FDI, the loss in terms of FDI, even only up to 1996, was 71% of Sri Lanka's GDP. Right. Loss of tourism. Tourism is the third largest employer in Sri Lanka and third largest money grosser for the economy. In terms of tourism, Sri Lanka lost something like 6,341 million US dollars between the years 1983 to 2004 only, at the peak of the conflict. Right. Budget deficits ranged upwards of 8%. All of us know. Our general also had pointed out. But it ranged up to 12.2%, that is 2,057 billion USD in 2021, right, last year. The public debt is 107% of its GDP. That means you have more loan than what you ever earn. Fair enough. Okay. The balance of payment deficit therefore reached 3.9 billion US dollars in 2021. Everyone knows what is the GDP of Sri Lanka. And that is the reason what you are seeing. The economic crisis that we are seeing is precisely because of this. Fine. Okay. Now let me take another theory. I'm sorry. Realism, political economy. Okay. In political economic theory, we say realism or mercantilism, okay, actually is contributing to state power. Does it? Let us see. Right? It states that politics and economics are very closely related and cannot be separated from one another. Realism stresses that the economy should be subject to the primary goal of increasing state power. In short, politics must take precedence over economy. Fair enough. Okay. The ruling disposition in Sri Lanka was guided by two concerns. Why did they lean for all these external debts? Okay. They had two concerns. Both are misplaced, that the eminent speakers have already pointed out, and we will be hearing about it some more in short time. Okay. The perceived big brother attitude of India, which Sri Lankan political leadership took it as necessary to balance it with China, necessary to balance it with relationship with Pakistan, all this. They thought they are balancing India. Actually, they were tipping their own balance. Fair enough. Fine. The second reason is the ease of assistance from China. Already in the morning it was mentioned that the World Bank and other ADB and all other international lending agencies look at what you are. They see, in fact, the World Bank assesses you by what we call as WGI, World Governance Indicators. There are 6 indicators. It was a fantastic work done by World Bank in 1993, and I request the young scholars to go back and check it out. WGI. There are 6 parameters. Okay? And those 6 parameters are rigidly applied to see whether you deserve a loan. Should you be given a loan? Whereas, if you take the loan from IMF or World Bank, you pay 4% annually repayment. But if you take from China, you pay 5%. More interest. But China doesn't ask you questions. It doesn't ask you whether your politics is corrupt, whether your country is in bonkers, whether your railroads are all, they cannot take the kind of infrastructure demand. They don't ask you questions. They give you money. Oh, fine. So, misplaced notions, I talked about 2. So, Sri Lanka, in the process of borrowing extensively from all countries, you know, an interesting thing happened in Sri Lanka, to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka became an upper middle income country. It was placed as upper middle income country in 2019 by the World Bank. Everybody should give a clap because Sri Lanka reached somewhere. But actually that was the undoing of Sri Lanka, if I may say so. Why? Because the moment a country is classified as upper middle income country, then you don't get the kind of lenient or concessional loans or borrowings from international agencies. It is difficult for you. You have to provide more standards, internal standards. I talked about WGI. Take internal standards to ask for a loan. So what was Sri Lanka's options? Sri Lanka's options was turn towards China. Thank you so much. Fine. All right. Okay. Now, let me just show you. I have finished my time. So I will just, yes, 2 lines. So I have just given you the figures. Take care of Sri Lanka's external debt, how it has progressed. Take care from 435.7 million in 1970 to 56.34 billion in 2020. The data is from World Bank for you to see. Fine. Since I am on time, sir, I will just take only last slide. I will go to the last slide. Right. This is the trajectory of the borrowings, and you will find an increasing dependence. From 2004 onwards, the orange depicts Chinese lending, and the blue depicts the rest of the world. Fine. Okay. So, right. This is the Chinese investments in Sri Lanka. There is another theory called Constructivism. I have some thoughts for that also, but I don't have the time. Okay. And what happens? We talked about Colombo port city and all that. This is what was estimated that the port city project will provide to Sri Lanka, what you are seeing on the right side column. If only it had happened, Sri Lanka will not be seeing the crisis that it is seeing today. Why? That is where I will end this thing. There is an interesting economic theory. It's called behavioral economics. It's a sunk cost fallacy. What is sunk cost fallacy is persisting on a decision, being obsessed with a decision because you actually are afraid of the failure which you know will come because of that decision. Sri Lankan leadership went on what we call as a trip. The trip was, in behavioral economics, we will say sunk cost fallacy. Irretrievably, they lost their own country for themselves. Okay, it's as simple as that. Fine. So, I have explained it in political and economic terms also. With that, I will finish, but just two more indulgence of 30 seconds, sir. I'll just capture some lessons because, you know, when you explore any country or any phenomenon with the idea of, with the lens of theories, then you must take out lessons also. What lessons can we take out from Sri Lanka for everyone, not just for Sri Lanka? The first lesson is misplaced nationalism results in prolonged internal conflict. The ability of the country to sustain the cost disproportionate to its size will ruin that country. The second lesson is having instituted a democratic framework, increasingly succumbing to politics among political families or clan politics undermines democratic process and its dividends. The third is conspicuous erosion of culture, social structures, and human institutional frameworks undermines national integration. The benefits of well-meaning intervention from India, obviously, which was talked about, they were sacrificed for perceived but unrealistic political gains domestically. Domestic political considerations driving foreign policy are detrimental to making informed options. Okay? The last point is endemic corruption and clan-dependent politics undermines all possible economic gains. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the time. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. This mic is on. Friends, now Dr. Hasith Kandaudahewa from Department of International Relations, University of Colombo, will be speaking. He's done his PhD on India-Sri Lanka relations from the University of Auckland. So the focus will be on that. Over to, good morning, rather good afternoon, I should say.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, there you are. Please go ahead, Doctor. By the way, how do you pronounce your name? I don't want to. Your
It's quite
surname.
difficult. It is quite difficult. It says Kandaudahewa. The meaning
Kandaudahewa.
Kandaudahewa. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Please,
that's absolutely
if I
fine.
mispronounced, I apologize. Please go ahead.
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's
we
fine.
are looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for inviting me to deliver the very key topic related to Sri Lanka by the C3S. So today I'm going to discuss about the very important topic. My topic is Sri Lanka between India and China, and the present and the future in Indian Ocean domain. So basically, let me very briefly give some outline about Sri Lanka's foreign policy over last 75 years. I'm using a 2 minute or 3 minute to explain some historical narratives and then move into the more contemporary knowledge. So if you look at the Sri Lanka, for over last 74 years, we have been very famously known for the Pearl of Indian Ocean. We are very rich and we are strategically located in the middle of the Indian Ocean and also very close to the sea line of communications. And during last 74 years, we were governed by the democracy. And while we were promoting the non-alignment as a gravity of our foreign policy directions. I mean, since India was active partner since Nehru period, Sri Lanka also be the partner for the non-alignment movement as well as the Indian Ocean Peace Zone proposal. So if you come to the more recent context, especially during the previous President Mahinda Rajapaksa era from 2005 to 2015, which is very argumental era. So we have ended the 30 years of long internal war through the military victory. We defeated LTT in military wise, but unfortunately, even today, I mean, almost like 13 years now, we failed to provide the political solutions or address the root causes of the Sri Lankan internal war. So, at the parallel to the internal war, since 2007, Sri Lanka launched a grand strategic advancement strategy through promoting the visible infrastructure development across the country. So, the grand strategic advancement is part of the becoming the hub of Asia. Actually, it was one of the vision of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa and also the former President J.R. Jayawardena, the first executive president of Sri Lanka. So we launched the grand strategy in order to become a is to escape from the most dilemma and also increase Sri Lanka's presence and the demanding and bargaining power in international power theater. So this grand strategic advancement started in 2007, and even today we are continuing with some of the grand advancement projects. And during the grand strategic advancement, we expect some collaboration. We invited collaboration from the near and outer neighborhood of Sri Lanka. Especially, we invited India. Since 2002 and 2007, we invited India to invest in Sri Lanka's maritime sector and also Sri Lanka's energy and power sector from 2005. Uh, but only the China was remain active in Sri Lankan aid despite to the political differences between we had with China. So basically, India remained silent, but China opened their big wallet and provided a lot of money for the some of the white elephant project or some of the non-sustainable infrastructure development project. So as a result of that, Sri Lanka has put I mean, the political administration has put our strategic non-alignment into the serious risk. From 2011, we can see after the, especially after the 2012 UNHRC session, when India voted against us, Sri Lanka started to drift toward China in order to get more political support and also get more economic aid from China. But when we drift toward China, obviously we put the strategic stability within the EORA area, specifically allowing the outsider, I mean outer region player to come within the Indian sub-region and play the more prominent role. As a result of that, our relationship with India started to decline from 2012 to 2015. But in 2015, due to the government change, there are slight improvement. But unfortunately, from 2017, after the debt equity swap in Hambantota port, Sri Lanka-India relationship started to become some problematic, especially when it comes to the Indian Ocean maritime domains. So if you come to the recent past, like last 3 years or 4 years period, especially during the previous President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, since his inauguration in 2009, we have encountered a lot of multi-phase issues due to lack of efficient political decision. For example, we were unable to make some positive deals with, progressive deals with Japan when it comes to the transport sector, especially the LRT project, light train project. And also at the same time, we were unable to sign the what do you call MCC agreement and many positive, progressive agreement which is beneficial for us. But at the same time, we face some economic crisis because of the COVID pandemic, and during the first part we were able to manage, but during the second part of the second wave, the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime lost the control of the COVID management and the situation become really worse. The foreign income, foreign revenue, and Sri Lankan foreign reserves started to decline over last 2 years. From 2022, we entered into the economic crisis officially from January this year, and our inflation has been raised from 12% to within 1 month period 22%, and currently based on the central bank statistic it is 58% in June. But as I got to know in today morning, our July inflation ratio is 68%, which is very high, and we are number two behind. We are only behind the Venezuela, according to the Hanke ranking in the world, and actual inflation ratio is nearly 90% also. And as a result of this economic crisis, our economic growth has reduced to the minus percentage after a very long period. And it's very important because even during the war period, we were very much stable in economic wise, and unemployment is nearly based on official radio is 5.1, but it's nearly 12%, from 8 to 12% radio. As you can see in the graph, you can see a very drastic increase of inflation happened over last 6 months or 7 months in Sri Lanka. So at the same time, we have encountered some strategic uh, deterrence, and also with the new presidency come after the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was outcast by the public, and the president, former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe become a ninth executive president. And during his period, I mean, as a person, he is a very much open for the pro-West foreign policy. We have demonstrated that he has very close relationship with India and also the United States also. And he was the one person who started one of the Grand Strategic Advancement Project in 2002. However, during his last premiership from 2015 to 2019 period, he unfortunately had to hand over the port of Hambantota to China under the debt swap, which caused a lot of issues within the governance period. At the same time, the president at that time, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe promoted the theme of the norm of free and open in the Pacific, which included China also over the last few period. And also when he inaugurated his first speech at the parliament, he mentioned about Indian Ocean, and especially how it should be the free and open for all partners, especially Sri Lanka and India, and also US, Australia, and other countries. So we can see this foreign policy movement, and at this movement, I mean, in the presently, we are seeing a lot of instability within the Sri Lankan foreign policy, because Sri Lanka usually is a non-aligned country, but recently we are demonstrating the hedging strategy with China and India as well as US. So now the question came today in Sri Lankan media: where will be the Prime Minister or President Wickremesinghe first visit? Because as it reported in today, he will first visit to China and then to Japan, which is very uh, not a common thing. Or when we compare to the recent history, if you look at last 5 or 4 presidencies, all the president visited India first, then visited to other countries. But the President Wickremesinghe is planned to visit uh, China first and then the Japan second, which might cause some the regional instability, especially make some anger. Uh, we will make India a little bit uh, anger to these policies. And not only that, actually, if you look at that last 2 3 weeks, we are encountering the strategic debate. Especially, we had a Sri Lanka and China, and also India was in the middle of the strategic and also diplomatic crisis because of a Yuan Wang Pai. And as we know that we have granted the permission to enter the Yuan Wang Pai Chinese research vessel into Sri Lankan Hambantota port, the India and many countries identify it as a threat to the Indian Ocean peace and security, especially as a direct threat to the India's security orbit, and also India's dominance in Indian Ocean region. So, but at the same time, China refused that it may pose a threat to the India, and from the Chinese perspective, it is just as a deal between the two independent states, Sri Lanka and China, and India has no voice over the two bilateral exchange between that. This is a timeline of the Yuan 5. If you look at the most incident, the Sri Lanka has at very beginning has denied that visit of the Yuan 5, which is the reason it caused a strategic anxiety among the Indian policymakers. When it's reported by the several Indian newspapers, we denied. I mean, our government officially denied. But later, we have to listen to the Indian perspective, and we officially request the China to delay the arrival of Yuan M5 in August 6th. But unfortunately, the China was very much actively engaging with the present governors, and they have informed the Sri Lanka that they need to visit in order to obtain the uh, uh, necessary supply. So as a result of that, we were unable to make a mutual ground over last week, but unfortunately, the Sri Lanka was have to give some exclusive right to the both parties in order to settle this diplomatic crisis. For example, we allowed the Yuan 5 to board into the port of Hambantota in 16th of August, and the 17th of August, we granted the two energy project to the Adani Group in India to construct. So that is how Sri Lanka balanced the diplomatic crisis through the hedging, which is quite questionable when it comes to the foreign policy. So now let me show you let it be very brief about what is the Sri Lankan foreign policy perspective and what is China and India. As you can see, when it comes to the Indian Ocean region, Sri Lanka believed that free and open in the Pacific, which include the China. But from China's perspective, they believe the open for all. That means there should not be any regional powers who dominate the Indian Ocean region. But when it comes to the Indian perspective, we can clearly say the Indo-Pacific norm and the rule-based order, which exclude China from operating or making dominance within the Indian Ocean region. And if you compare with the Indian Ocean region and the South China Sea, China believe that South China Sea should be the under the China's domain, while India believe it should be free from China's domain, while Sri Lanka believe it should be free and open for all. So we can see some similarities and very conservational differences between the Sri Lanka, China, and Indian maritime domains perspective. And also, we promote, as a Sri Lanka, we promote the hub of Asia, an open and free port for all the nations, while China thinking Sri Lanka as a strategic asset within the BRI, which is open for all, but should give a more priority to China when it comes to the negotiation or trade or whatever the benefits. And India is believed that they should be a first respondent within the South Asian region, especially when it comes to the strategic matters. And also, if you look at compare the partnership nature, we can clearly see how the Sri Lanka and India and China make a relationship. If you especially focus on China, China is very much engaging with the bilateral aspect, while India is using the bi and multilateral aspect when they are negotiating with other countries. So, if you look at the least policies, these are the current crises and current challenges and opportunities that President Ranil Wickremesinghe will face. Basically, I can identify 5 areas like maintaining the non-aligned policy and maintaining the needs, ensure the domestic need, and also debt management and promoting the right, that means democracy, and uh, being neutral in the power politics. When it comes to the foreign policy, the first three and the last one would be the much more center or the gravity of the Wickremesinghe's foreign policy. Especially, Sri Lanka is facing challenge how we should maintain the non-aligned policy and how we should play the neutral policy when it comes to the global matters like the Russia-Ukraine crisis and Taiwan, China-US crisis. And also how we should promote the free and open Indo-Pacific. At the same time, we promote the BRI also. So Sri Lanka is facing a foreign policy dilemma when it comes to the maintaining the non-aligned policy. On the other hand, the needs and debts also play in the vital role during the President Wickremesinghe's period. Especially, we need the approval, we need the aid from India in order to continue the day-to-day life and also maintain the emergency needs to fulfill the emergency need. At the same time, we need India support to ensure the IMF assistance. On the other hand, we need China support to engage with the debt restructuring program. Especially, we need the approval because they own 8% of Sri Lankan loans. So, in order to be sign the staff level agreement with IMF, we are required Chinese approval, or either China should cut off their aids. That which is very famous. I mean, yesterday when the President Vikramasinghe gave an interview to the CNN, he mentioned that Sri Lanka expecting that China will completely cut down all the loan. So these kind of policies we expect from the international community and also present the challenges as well as opportunities to Sri Lanka. And when it comes to power politics, Sri Lanka is facing the balance between how we should maintain a middle way between the BRI and the Pacific. At the same time, India was China issue as well as US-China issue. So I'm sure that over the next few months, the President Vikramasinghe will go through the really difficult or tough time in order to balance his foreign policy, specifically between India and China. And his decision will make a huge impact also. And I think I will use another 2 minutes. My last slide about the future forecast. And presently we can see that Sri Lanka will officially follow the hedging strategy, which grant exclusive privileges for both China and India. But if we continue this hedging strategy, it may hinder, in the long term, it may hinder the Sri Lankan foreign policy autonomy. Okay? At the same time, both India and China will closely monitor the Sri Lankan strategic and economic development, because Sri Lanka is a pivotal state who can cause the effect of domino effect within the region. If Sri Lanka fails, of course, Maldives and Pakistan will fail into the same trap. So that is why China is very cautious when it comes to the Yuan 5 issue also. And both India and China.
Hasith,
Yes.
we are running out of time.
Okay. One. Yeah.
Please,
One.
please.
Yeah. So both countries, India and China, will ensure their hegemonic presence in ideological and strategic dimension through the mix of the conventional and unconventional approaches. And finally, because of India's Indian Ocean region perspective and China's BRI perspective, most of the small states within the Indian Ocean region are highly vulnerable, especially because of this anticipated unconventional strategic battle between two Asian giants. And however, there's a room for opportunities also. What we need to do is Sri Lanka need to understand the strategic directions and take a part and grab the skills or the opportunities or benefit from the strategic issue. And that would be all. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I took a few minutes extra. And you can contact me via my email address if you have a question.
Hasith, thank you
Yes.
for an excellent presentation, very dispassionately examining the issues. Kindly await the question answer session
Yeah.
along with other
Sure.
speakers. Kindly, you are. Yeah. Please. Questioners, have you got your questions ready? All gone to sleep after lunch, I think. Suddenly waken up. Yeah, please. By one, we will collect the questions and then collectively answer. Yeah, you can come here.
Hello, I'm Ayan. I'm a foreign affairs journalist. I would like to make the Sri Lankan academician make my addressee. My question is about, how the IMF will take a note of reforming the economy. For example, the staff level talks are going on with Islamabad as well. There are several rounds with the Islamabad, and they're checking off the points, what are the reforms they're taking. For example, when Imran...
Ayanksha, question please.
Yeah, sure.
We
So-
don't want statements.
Yeah. So in case of Pakistan, they have slashed the, they have increased the taxes and they have hiked the electricity prices. That's how they're earning the revenues. So what the case of Sri Lanka? From where the money will come to repay the IMF? Because we have to, you have to ensure the IMF this thing.
The question is, how will the money come for Sri Lanka to pay for reforms of IMF reforms? Am I correct?
Yes, I hear. Can I answer the question first?
No, kindly hold on, Hasith. We will collectively take the questions and
Yeah.
then answer them.
Hi, I'm Joanita, IIT Madras. So I had a question to our Srinivasan. So I was curious as to how you would place constructivism in the problem of Sri Lanka, current Sri Lankan crisis. Could you give a brief explanation of that?
Hi, so my question is, this is the first time I'm hearing about debt reconstruction, and I want you to explain how the process will begin with China and Sri Lanka taking, having talks on debt reconstruction, and how the process will be, because
The concept,
of debt reconstruction.
debt reconstruction.
Yeah, of
Bet-
China and Sri
between
Lanka.
China and Sri Lanka.
How the process will go.
This is for Hasith.
Hasith, yes.
Okay. There is one question for Dr. Srinivasan. No, firstly, we will take Hasith's questions. Two questions to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for
Yeah,
very interesting question.
One
actually.
moment, Hasith.
Okay,
Professor
okay, sure.
Srinivasan wants to ask one question.
My name is Srinivasan. Now, every country has a right to diversify its strategic and economic linkages. I no problem with Sri Lanka having economic and strategic relations with other, but the relationship is meant to cut India to size. We want to reduce Indian influence, and many of us will see it as an anti-Indian act. And if you look at Sri Lanka's foreign policy from the days of independence, whether it is your Commodore linkages, whether it is retention on the British bases in Colombo,
Professor,
your health.
Professor, question please.
No, this is what I'm
Yeah.
giving illustrations of anti-Indian acts by Colombo.
Okay.
And in this context, I can go on mentioning incidents where Colombo's intention was to cut India to size. And that is something which, in our immediate neighborhood, India will not permit.
Thank you. Hasith, now you can.
Thank you very much. It's interesting questions. Let me answer the first question first. So we are, as President expressed during his interview with CNN yesterday, the Sri Lanka is trying to pay the IMF or all the loans through the privatization of most three government entities, especially the Sri Lankan Airlines. That means one of the airlines that we own, and also through the privatization of telecommunication, and also, more importantly, with petroleum or energy resources privatization. That is one way that we are trying to get money to pay. The second way is we are going to increase the taxes to the intermediate budget. And of course, as you know, that most income tax will be automatically increased from this end of next month. So the tax percentage will be 24%, which is very quite high compared to the Sri Lanka previous state. And also the government is planning to introduce the new domestic taxes, as well as taxes from the foreign currency earning. So these are the main sources of government to get the income. Other than that, we are trying to promote the overseas employment for all government workers, and in order to get more and more foreign currencies into the Sri Lanka in order to increase our foreign reserve. That is one of the first perspective. And I think my understanding about second question, yes, of course, Sri Lanka is an independent country. We have autonomy to direct our foreign policy as we wish, but unfortunately, we we don't have economic capability or the strategic capability to launch some of the foreign policy decisions like advancement of infrastructure or and many things. So in that sense, we need to seek the partnership with either with India or someone who has a big money, big pocket. But Europe is not suitable for us because they put a lot of conditions. US is not giving us a lot of money because they have a lot of strings or condition attached. Only party we get money very easy is China, and second is India. But India's side it take a delay, so that's some sort of delay. So that is why when we are fulfilling our need, we need to sometimes give up some sort of our sovereignty or independence in foreign policy making process. I think I have a second question. I miss it. Can you repeat the second one?
Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, but the reconstruction of the debt of the how do you visualize reconstruction of debt with China? China is not agreeing. So far, China has not agreed to the reconstruction. So how do you restructuring the debt?
Yeah,
How
very
do you
good
visualize?
question. Yeah, I as on August 6th, China has agreed to the restructuring program. That is one of the conditions that they put when we blocked the Yuangyang 5 ship, the research vessel. So officially, China has informed that they are willing to support or willing to restructure the debt, 8% of debt we own. And also China is very much interested on acquiring some of the strategic assets called Matala International Airport. And also at the same time, China has requested more land areas in Iranamadu, which is very closer to Indian communication range. They want to build the airspace, the private airspace, and also they want to build some energy project in Sri Lanka, especially the coal power project. So we have to give some of the strategic assets or valuable locations to China in order to keep them in the process and in order to get whatever they are concerned. That is how we are going to manage the China.
Let them do it if they want. If they want to do it, how can we? Now I think it is. Yeah. Srinivasan.
Yes. Dr. Srinivasan. All right. The question to me was about constructivism. There are two precepts which are very relevant when we talk about constructivism as a theory. The first precept is that culture, social structures, and institutional frameworks matter. The second precept is that social construction of reality. That means whatever reality is perceived to be, for the most part, people have invented it. It exists in their imagination. So when we take these two precepts and apply it to the case of Sri Lanka, we find that from the 1956 election issue of subjugating Tamil language to making Buddhism as the predominant religion to all the other things which we have been talking about from the morning, consciously the bondage which culture could have otherwise created was compromised. Because of that, the other institutional structures, coupled with corruption of course, were also undermined. So the first precept of constructivism sort of, I will say, stands validated in the case of a nation also. Let's look at the second precept. The second precept is social construction of reality. What did the polity, the political leadership of Sri Lanka tried to achieve. They tried to achieve that by a brilliant economic performance, all these inequities that have been created in the society will be subsumed. People will ignore them because people are prosperous. The nation has got money, people have got money. That was a reality which unfortunately they probably constructed it for themselves. But the current events in Sri Lanka do not prove that this reality is indeed a reality. I hope it answers your question.
Thank you. There is one question for Commodore Venugopal. Kindly read the question also, Commodore.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, could you please share your thoughts on 1987 Indo-Sri Lanka Accord in connection with the visit of Yon Wong 5 to Hambantota, along with the China's Type 054 Alpha frigate berth? It's a very long question indeed, and I'll try and be brief in my answer. First of all, the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord of 1987 was basically dealing with the civil war in Sri Lanka, and the 1987 Accord dealt mostly with, the clauses were mostly connection with the civil war and the LTT, the ELM cause. That said, there is no clause in the agreement which says that Colombo is not allowed, or Sri Lanka is not allowed to berth any foreign ship or a military aircraft to transit through their land. There is no clause. However, there is a clause in the agreement which says very clearly that India should not host any activity which is against Sri Lanka's interest for giving a flip to the civil war in Sri Lanka. That is the clause. I've checked this issue, and I have seen this being quoted in many forums, including media, about this clause in the agreement which prevents military aircraft or ship to be transiting through Hambantota or Colombo. So you may like to add something. Let me finish first. Otherwise, Sri Lanka is a sovereign state. It is well within their rights to have any ship from their friendly countries of theirs to berth there. All they require is a diplomatic clearance. There is no need for them to take permission from New Delhi. Let me be very clear on that. However, as a gesture, diplomatic goodwill, there could be some back-channel communication between Colombo and New Delhi to inform them of this particular visit of the ship. That is only if it is a diplomatic courtesy. It is not mandatory. Now, regarding the Type 054 Alpha frigate, of Pakistan being berthed in Colombo at the same time, this vessel was built in Chinese shipyard, and she is on her way to Karachi. So she stopped there for a fueling halt. So these two activities, it's basically, I would say, a coincidence. And moreover, I don't think the berthing of the Yang or the frigate 054 Alpha has got any connect. Okay, we can keep thinking there's a connect. So there are so many ways to think that it is not also. As far as the survey vessel is concerned, it is basically a satellite tracking vessel. And Chinese, already it's been mentioned in the presentation earlier, that Chinese have got satellites all over the universe, and they keep tracking. They do have a lot of facilities for oceanographic research, but let me also assure you that ocean is a changing medium. Whatever data they collect can go to the archives. It is not going to be of any great relevance in any operations, I would say for a submarine operation, because a submarine commander will act as per his tactical instinct and not as per what is data available at any one time. And moreover, All this information regarding temperature profiles in Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean is all available in open literature nowadays. There is no great need for any survey vessel to come there and start measuring bathymetric data or something. It's no big deal, if you ask me. And I don't think we need to get too perturbed about it. All the best we can do is to have our own ship there, as Commodore Vasan sir had suggested many times in different forums, our own ships there to track the movement of the survey vessel. Thank you.
Thank you. The question to me is, you may please clarify on the 1987 Accord. I presume I don't know how many of you have seen the Accord and also the background to it, how the Accord came about. If you read the 1987 Accord, it has got three parts. One is the Cold War at that time. In Afghanistan, the Soviet Union was taking a beating at that time, and the Americans were establishing listening posts in the form of Voice of America broadcasting station in Trincomalee and Colombo, which presumably India did not like, because India has had very soft corner for the Soviets, and so India had raised this issue. This came about, and 1987 Accord came about after the J.R. Jayawardena went to Pakistan and US to pressurize India to desist from assisting the Tamil separatists based here. And these interventions were not accepted at that time, because both of them sort of dropped Sri Lanka's request like hot bricks. So we should see the environment at that time. To my mind, the Tamils, the Tamil issue suited the coalition politics in India. I am sorry to disappoint those who are votaries of Indira Gandhi has a big following in Sri Lanka, Tamils. So I am sorry to disappoint them. It is part of the coalition politics in Tamil Nadu. Indira Gandhi needed support of one of the Dravidian parties and used MGR, who wholeheartedly supported it. That is how the thing came about. Actually in Tamil Nadu, the support was divided between political parties. LTTE was supported originally by MGR. Tello was supported by DMK, and the communists supported EPRLF. And this is how it was. So we should see it in the background. There is no point. These are political documents as much as foreign policy agreements. So we should see it in the background. The Tamils come as an add-on letter, which is attached. If you kindly see the document, that was supposed to be seen by JR and Initial. There is a document available in the net also. So kindly see the document. I fully agree with the Commodore that there is nothing that says specifically no foreign warships should come to Sri Lanka ports. It cannot be done in normal times, but Sri Lanka has an existing agreement now, a strategic cooperation agreement with India. So, like good friends, they must inform and they must take India's concerns into their reckoning. before they allow. So this is what I was telling. Sri Lanka is what is between what they say between the devil and India is not the devil. So I won't say between a hard place and whatever it is. So we should see, put it in perspective. I think actually it is provocative of China to send this ship at this time when in Taiwan they are getting, I think the general mentioned about it. We should see the Taiwan situation heating up and the Ukraine war also. So if you put it in that context, you will see that I will finish it, Commodore, I will just finish it. So we should see it in the context. So it is in that attached letter, all the Tamil issue is discussed. In the main agreement, there is the recognition of the language, Tamil language, and the places of habitation, those things. Other things come in that attached letter, which has been initialed not by the guys who signed the agreement, the two heads of state, but they have been initialed as seen. So kindly take a look at it. And I am sure Professor has a question on this. I think exactly. That's what I was mentioning, attached letters.
The accord and the exchange of letters meant that Sri Lanka's foreign policy and strategic policy will take India's interests into consideration.
Correct. Into consideration.
No.
Correct.
No. I'll give you one illustration. Soon after the accord was signed, I met Ambassador Mani Dixit in his office. They shifted from the State Bank of India to the opposite Taj Samudra, where his room was facing the sea. He was popularly known as Viceroy Dixit. A ship was passing through. And before me, he wanted perhaps to impress me. He was ringing up the naval attaché. I see a ship going through the Colombo harbor. Have they taken our permission for it? This was the sort of attitude that we were having in real practice towards Sri Lanka. What I want to say is that the accord in many ways exemplified what we want, that Sri Lanka will not do any action which is against India. That is what I mentioned, that Sri Lanka has got the right to diversify its purchase, and we will not. But if the diversification is meant to cut India to size,
I do not agree with this. Sri Lanka is hardly in a position. We can discuss this over a cup of tea. Sri Lanka is a small country. How can they cut down India? It is being humorous, I think. No. Anyway, we can have a discussion over a cup of tea. I think we had a very fruitful session. Hasith, thank you for making an excellent presentation. I really appreciate you. You are patiently taking the questions and explaining them. Thanks a lot. It always clarifies our mind also to get a Sri Lankan viewpoint, because all of us are not taking, we are not playing a cricket match, India versus Sri Lanka. Even that has got rules. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I had an excellent and the two senior people and they were wise, and thank you very much for my panelists also. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for making interesting, presentations. I am slightly wiser, I should say, on the political theories, though I'll have to go and look up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. On behalf of C3S family, I extend a gratitude for a wonderful session that we had. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Dr. Hasith, for joining us. Thank you. Please remain seated. Within a short break, we'll be beginning with our third session. Thank you.